My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk. So happy to have you here. And don't forget, guys, once a month, about the third Tuesday of each month, we do our men's group chat. Go to gaymenschat.com and you can sign up so you get the notifications. You can't get in without signing up, boys, I'm telling you. But just wanted to throw that in before we dive in today, because today we're going to dive into something that gets talked about, probably doesn't get talked about enough for us as gay men, or these things where we hit the bumps in the road and suddenly it's a pretty big bump in the road and it changes everything in our lives. For today's guest, he has lived kind of all over the country, had some good times in Portland and in Atlanta area and all that good stuff. Did some pretty cool stuff. He was part of the Wolf Creek Radical Fairy Sanctuary. Some of you might know that. And then something happened. Something happened that changed his life completely. And he is what we're going to label as a beautiful cancer survivor. And the reason I had asked him to come on was because another part of my world that listens to the podcast and is part of the community is good friends with him. Some of you remember Jason, who was on not long ago. He talked about his journey with his husband passing and his own cancer stuff. And I feel like these are the conversations we need to keep having. Today, I am so excited to be talking with Dallas Oliver. He's got a great cancer survivor group he's going to talk about. And we're going to journey through what happens, how you get to the place where you just realize you can be a 43-year-old gay man living with something that's missing. I'll let him explain that. But you can still thrive because you're grounded in your own resilience, your authenticity, and you are living your lived experience in the best way possible. I can't wait to share him with you. Dallas, welcome to the podcast, man. So glad you're here.
Rick, it is really great to be here. I'm excited to talk about my journey and my story and see what I can do to help others that may be on similar journeys.
Yeah. Well, cancer isn't an easy thing. I mean, I haven't personally dealt with it. My mom just recently had breast cancer, so we were on that journey with her. She's doing good, knock on wood. You're still here, but let's kind of dive in. Like you had a lot of stuff going on. You came out. You said you came out at Piedmont Park. Is that where you really came out, man? Is that the truth?
Is? Yeah. So
awesome.
I'll give a little quick history of Dallas because it's a pretty unique story. So
history of Dallas or history of Dallas Oliver. People can take that two ways, you know.
Yeah, history of Dallas Oliver. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So I was born and raised in South Georgia, a little town called Albany. Went to school at Georgia Southern, got an art degree back in 2005. And, right when I came out of college, I was like, I got to come out. Like, I'm done with college. I'm living as an adult now. It's time for me to like you talk about a lot, be your authentic self. And, I one night broke up with my girlfriend. And I was living with her at my cousin's house in Buckhead. And then I went to my best friend's house who was living on Piedmont Park on 10th Avenue. And I got to his house early in the morning or something and went and knocked on his door. He let me in and I was like, I got to tell you something. I'm gay. And then, we talked and then I went across the street and I sat under this big tree in the middle of Piedmont Park and I just cried for about an hour. And it was tears of like being overwhelmed and being happy and, just feeling alive and terrified. And like a few hours after that, I got on a plane and went to Portland, Oregon to visit for, supposed to be 7 days. And I think I stayed for about 2 weeks and was able to, like, when I landed in Portland, came out to my friend that picked me up from the airport. And she was like, great. I'm so glad to hear that. We're going to my friend's birthday party tonight and it's at a gay bar and I didn't want you to be uncomfortable. So, I really like hit the door running and ended up coming back to Atlanta for a couple of months and coming out to everyone I knew and family included. then got back on another plane and moved out to Portland with like a couple of suitcases and a couple $100.
Wow.
And you know, did and just landed in Portland being my authentic self and just really hit the ground running, being a new
Mhm.
person. And
Well, that's a pretty dangerous place to be. They got so much unrest there. It's not safe to live there. I'm joking, of course,
it
but
was I mean,
it's
back
a crazy
in,
place. I'm
it's
gonna admit
great.
it is. I've been to Portland many, many times. I used to go to a conference up there called World Domination Summit. And everybody's like, "What is that all about? Are you going to a BDSM thing?" I'm like, "No, it's about community, adventure, and service." Well, why do they call it World Domination Summit? I'm like, wouldn't you rather dominate the world by community, adventure, and service rather than anything else? So, been
Yeah.
there. Yeah, keep Portland
Yep.
weird.
Yep.
Definitely has its
Yep.
moments. I remember
Yep.
I was actually getting ready to go on stage at that conference, and I was in the quote green room waiting to go on stage. I'm looking out the window at the Schnitzer Auditorium area, overlooking the street, and suddenly it's like you hear sirens, and here comes these police and all this stuff. And it was a protest thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, right in the middle of my talk, this is what's going down. You couldn't hear it in the theater, of course, but so anyway, so you got
Yeah.
there, you landed, you got your gay bar experience right out the gate after coming out,
Yeah.
and you started to build a life. So take us a little bit into the
Yeah.
life you started building.
Yeah, and you know, two major significant things that happened to me in Portland, Oregon was met the Radical Fairies, and started to learn that there was a spirituality outside of mainstream Christianity and other religions, and that there was a spirituality that was connected to being queer and being gay and being comfortable with the earth and helping the earth, and spirituality that was rooted in like community building and feeding and helping your community over anything else. And so that was really where I was able to be like, you know, shed off the Christianity of upbringing and like go into this more like pagan, queer centric, community activist oriented spiritual life, if you will. Um, so that was one of the major things, and the other thing that I just feel really inclined to mention, a little piece of queer history, is I met and started performing with the
Mm.
Sissy Boys in Portland, Oregon. Which, for those of you that don't know, Sissy Boy was this like punk, gender bending, drag activist performance group family thing. And it was just, you know, this really anarchist type movement that was in
Mm.
Portland for a couple of decade or so. Um, and yeah, so I just really like, you know, got in touch with bike riding and being in nature and like building community and realizing that your family is not blood, it's who you show up for and who shows up for you and who's there with you through thick and thin, and you know, who makes you laugh and cooks you food and gives you shelter. Um,
I love that. I
so
love that little phrase you just dropped. I mean, I'm gonna kind of go be a little Oprah moment, like, okay, there's well, I would say tweet, but I don't tweet anymore. But that your blood is not, your
yeah,
family is not blood. It's such an interesting thing. And I was just getting ready to ask you, like, okay, well, what are some of the things you learned, like this little interesting journey, discovering the fairies, finding that spirituality? It sounds like that was a pretty big moment. Like your
yeah.
family is not blood, but what else did you learn, like as all this is opening up for you?
Yeah, I mean, you know, after living in Portland for 5 or 6 years, I ended up living in Southern Oregon for about 5, 6 years out in
Mm.
the middle of the woods. I was at the Radical Fairy Sanctuary for a few years, and then I was even deeper into the woods on the creek for many years after that in an old barn that was kind of a cabin.
Mm.
And you know, it's just such a great experience to live that close to nature. And, you know, it also was very lonely and isolating being that far out in the woods. And that's kind of what was the catalyst for me moving back to Atlanta, um,
Mm.
which I guess we'll jump into that because that gets to the real nitty-gritty of the story. Um,
What do you feel like is like, I love this close to nature and everything. So I'm feeling like there's things that came from the nature experience that probably helped where we're going here without the audience going, okay, can you just get to where we're going? But there's got to be some stuff that you've learned from like here close to nature, because that's what you said. There's got to be something that it helped with peace of mind, even though loneliness. I mean, what are some of
yeah.
those things that went through your head while you were out there communing with nature, so to speak?
Um, one of the things was being healthier,
Mm,
and like having a more direct connection to your food.
mm,
Like I would buy half a cow from the neighbors and I would trade part of that cow for part of a pig that other neighbors raised.
mm, mm.
And I would get, chickens from close by and eggs from the neighbor and milk from the neighbors. And, there's a lot of trade and barter. And, so I was taking, I wasn't being very good to myself, honestly.
Mm,
Like I was
mm.
eating better food just because that's the only option was better food
Right.
around me. Um, but I mean, I guess that I don't know. I don't know if I want to say not taking good care of myself led to where we're going here, or if
Could be.
it,
I
it
mean,
could it
yeah,
did, honestly.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so let's jump to it. I moved
Yeah.
back to
So
Atlanta.
back here we go. We're on our way back to Atlanta, and then suddenly
Yeah, and
everything
then
starts to change.
I get back to Atlanta, and I'm living here for a few years, and I got my massage license the first year I moved back. Helped my dad and my mom go through a divorce, helped my dad do all this medical stuff. And then I started to have some medical stuff.
Mm,
What started as feeling discomfort when I swallowed turned into, um, inability to swallow food.
mm.
I started to, choke on food and it would get
Wow.
stuck. It would feel like it was sticking right down there where your stomach hits. And yeah, and the healthcare system in this country being what it is, and I had only had health insurance for about, I don't know, maybe a year and a half at this point. I had lived many years without health insurance, and um, so I didn't really understand how doctors and referrals and everything worked. So
Yeah.
I went to a primary care doctor and was like, I'm having difficulty swallowing, and they're like, you should see a gastroenterologist. Here's some referrals. And then you call and they don't take your insurance and you have to call around and you have to find it. So it took me about 8 months to get in, 6 months to get in to see a gastroenterologist.
Mm,
And when I finally did get in to see the gastroenterologist, I went in and I was like, I'm having trouble swallowing. Food gets stuck right down here. I
mm.
feel something getting stuck in my throat. Sometimes I throw it back up. I choked on ice cream the other night. What's going on?
Wow.
And my gastroenterologist, amazing person at Emory, he said, we're going to do an endoscopy tomorrow morning. How's that sound? And I was like, that sounds scary, but okay.
Yeah,
And
exactly. They're not
yeah,
fun. They are not
yeah.
fun.
And just the urgency that he had, and I
Well, at least he
remember
didn't say we're going to do an endoscopy and then we're going to turn around and do a colonoscopy and you're going to get it from both ends, man. So,
I would have liked that at the same time. I mean, that would
well,
have
true.
been, um, but I remember distinctly the moment where I was waking up from my endoscopy and
Mm,
the doctor put his arm on my shoulder, his hand on my shoulder, and he said, hey, it did not look good in there. I took a biopsy of 11 different spots. You're going to come back in 1 week and we're going to go over results and talk about next steps.
wow.
Prepare yourself. So, flash forward 1 week, I sit down with him and you hear the words that no one wants to hear. At the time, I was 39 years old. And he said, you have esophageal cancer. Um, it was the most life-changing words I've ever heard. And it holds with it a certain level of trauma that people that haven't heard those words might not understand. A certain level of fear,
Yeah,
you know, and it's yeah, it's life changing.
I'm sure it is. And it's not easy. I mean, again, I've never dealt with it, but I mean, personally, I remember when my dad called me and said, I need you to call me right back. And it's rare that my dad actually calls because it's rare because he's like, mom is always the one that's calling, right? And it came from his phone. I could see on my cell phone it was coming from his. And he goes, you need to call me back as soon as you can. Mom has cancer. I'm like, well, that's a heck of a message to leave, dad. And I was like, I saw the phone ring. And I'm like, it's just dad. I'll call later. And finally I did. And it was really hard, and I wasn't the one going through it, but it's not easy. and anybody who's listening who knows, your friend Jason shared really well a few months ago about his journey. I don't think anybody can say, oh yeah, I was totally prepared for this. You had a week to go home and like probably sit and worry. That's what I think. Like, well, thanks, doc. Thanks
Yeah.
for telling me all this. I mean, I guess the closest I can relate, honestly, Dallas, is just recently. I've had a lot of back issues. So here we are. We're recording this January of 2026. January 2025, I started having sciatica issues and they have not gone away. Not a little bit, but hardly. And then they did the deeper MRIs and x-rays and everything. And I remember when the doctor said to me, you've got 2 collapsed discs in there that we're going to have to do something with, and surgery is probably the option. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to do back surgery. That's as close as I can relate to it. So you get this word, you have to go home for a whole week and prepare yourself. What's going through your mind in that week?
I Googled, and when you Google at the time, when you Googled survival rate for esophageal cancer, it was like 17%. And so what's going through my mind is I should have stopped drinking years ago. I should have gone and had that surgery that the doctors told me I probably needed when I was 21 years old. But I was like too much of an alcoholic, closeted guy in college to show up for surgery. I was like, nah, I don't need that. I'm too
But was
young
the
and I'm
surgery
healthy.
related to the back then?
It
Was the surgery?
was.
Oh,
It
wow.
was. Yeah. My at the lower esophageal sphincter that goes between the esophagus and the stomach was mine was kind of eroded bad or had a slight deformity.
So
And they
even
said,
back,
yeah, back
even back
then.
then. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I was like, I'll just eat healthier and be great and it'll be okay. And then I, proceeded to not eat healthier and drink heavily for decades. And, to the point that I was still having active acid reflux every day, but I didn't know it because I had no more filling down there. My esophageal wall was just like eroded and like, covered in a tumor. So I couldn't feel it. Uh, so, that's one of
Well,
those
just
hard
just the
things.
fact that the doctor said I saw all whatever it was, 11 different places, that could not have been an easy thing to hear, because
No, I
right
mean,
there, that's like, okay, there's something major going on here.
yeah. And for him to say it did not look good, like those were the
Yeah.
words
So
he used.
those were
Yeah.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
tell me it does not look good. I mean, I've
Yeah.
had 2 strokes, and along those journeys, there's been a couple of things that have been said to me. I'm like, oh, okay. Now I'm very cognizant, obviously, of everything. But I'm also cognizant with caution and intention. I guess that's probably the best way to say it. Do I
Yeah.
run to the ER every time? No, but I go to the ER when I'm like, something's going down here. But
Hmm.
so you've got all
Yeah.
this going on. You're going back for the appointment. So take us
Yeah.
now. The real journey begins.
Yeah. So I go back for the appointment 1 week later, and I had an amazing support person with me, who ended up following me through my whole journey. And Royce Sobel was my like right hand
Mm,
person during all this, and I could not be here without them. And go support them, buy their artwork,
mm,
follow their story too. Um, but they were there with me. I went back to the appointment where he told me I had cancer, and he said, "What are you doing in an hour?" And I was like, "Whatever you tell me, I'm doing." And he was like, "You're gonna go get a CT scan down the street, and we're gonna go from there." And so he was like, he set me down and he handed me 3 sheets of paper. He was like, "This is your oncologist, this is your radiation oncologist, and this is your surgeon. They're going to be calling you in the next, 24 to 48 hours. If you haven't heard from them by Friday, give them a call. And you got this, but the oncologist and the surgeon they're gonna take over your care now." And it was, that was September 29th was the day I was diagnosed. And so my oncologist reached out to me like the next day or later that day. I was set up to see my oncologist within like less than a week. I was diagnosed on Tuesday, and the next Monday or something, I was in
Wow.
with my oncologist. And it was November 5th. So basically, 1 month and a couple of days from diagnosis until I started my first round of chemo.
Mm,
I was scheduled to do 6 rounds of chemo uh, and 28 rounds of proton radiation.
mm.
But when I went in for my last round of chemo, they admitted me to the hospital because it had been like, you know, 7 or 8 days since I had eaten. Um, you
Ish.
know, like, chemo is hell,
Yep.
and radiation with chemo is hell. And when your esophagus has a giant tumor in it that you can't get any food past, and they're like zapping it with radiation and hitting you with chemo, and you're trying to eat, but you're throwing up, and then you see like chunks of tumor come up
Hmm.
when you vomit, and like so yeah, they admitted me to the hospital, put me on port nutrition where they were like feeding me through my veins, because I didn't have a feeding tube or anything, and I was too weak to have a feeding tube put in.
Mm,
Um, and so I went about 13 days without food, uh, that time. And
mm.
yeah, so I only did 5 rounds of radiation or chemo, but they made me finish the radiation, 28 full rounds.
Wow.
Um, and I remember them, um, when I was in the hospital and I hadn't eaten for a long time, and I remember the like palliative pain
Pain
care
care team. Yep.
team came in, and like two or three of their badges said hospice on them, and I was like, "What's going on? Like,
Mm,
why are y'all here?" And they're like, "We are here to make sure that you're not in pain." And I was like, "Well, I am in pain," and and they're like, it was just amazing care. But it
mm,
was one of
mm.
those things like my diagnosis on my medical chart for that hospital visit was failure to thrive as an adult. And I just remember like being 39 years old, about to turn 40, and just thinking, wow, my medical diagnosis is failure to thrive as an adult. And like that was just hard to hear.
Well, I was gonna say hard to swallow, no pun intended, right? That's not an easy
Yeah.
thing to. I can't even imagine because
Yeah.
there's got to be pieces of you like, wow, I guess I've just been diminished to this, so what the hell, you
Yeah.
know, I'll never
Yeah.
massage again. I'll never do. And so I guess mental state going through all this, I bet those were a lot of thoughts like, well, I'll never do this. And then what's the point of this? I mean, there almost had to
Yeah.
be like a defeated, like a defeat that just is everlasting at that stage, I would
Yeah.
think.
I mean, there were times during chemo where I didn't want to kill myself. I didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
die, but it would have been so easy to.
Mm,
Like I felt so close to death that I thought I was like I could just stop right now,
yep.
and my body would just stop. And there was parts that wanted to do that. And if it wasn't for my community that was taking care of me at that time and my friends like showing up for me, I might have. So,
But then
but then,
you did, and then you began to create the community, and then you began to thrive. And I only know some of this because of what's been shared between Jason and you and I. But
yeah,
there was a corner got turned,
yeah,
and so take us there, like how you came into now. Here's where
yeah.
you sit, and here's what you're doing, and how'd
Well,
you get here, man?
yeah. So a little more happened medically. After the chemo and radiation, it gave me a little break, and then for my 40th birthday, literally my birthday was on a Saturday. I had to start fasting on my 40th birthday because I had my on Monday. So 24 hours after my birthday, basically, I had a transhiatal esophagectomy
Mm,
with gastric pull-up. So they go in through the neck and the abdomen, and they removed 9.5 inches of my esophagus, leaving about 3/4 of an inch. They
mm,
took about a fourth of my stomach and reshaped it. And so now I have what I call a stomophagus,
mm,
and it is located in my thoracic chest cavity. right up there next to my lungs and my heart. Um,
Wow.
so I had this major life change. I woke up in the ICU for my 40th birthday is how I claim it. And, the life I live, it's not too far off. We all kind of assumed I'd wake up in the hospital on my
Right.
40th, but it would have been for doing something fun.
Yeah.
So, I did that, had a complication that led to an emergency surgery and difficulty breathing for a minute and like a longer recovery of like 34 days, 32 days, something like that with no food or water through my mouth and just,
Mm.
horrible, horrible, crazy recovery and just, this surgery, it, the funny thing is when I finally had the surgery, it was almost a relief because for months leading up to that, it was like, oh, you're going to do chemo and radiation, but that's nothing because then you got this like major, intense, crazy surgery that's going to
Yeah.
change everything about your life. And so there was like nothing good to look forward to. And then after surgery, they were like, and we're going to do a year of immunotherapy. So there's a whole nother year of treatments after that. And, so while I'm like learning how to use a new body that can't do so many things that my old body could do. Things we take
So
for granted.
give us an example of like what it can, I mean, whatever you feel comfortable
Yeah.
sharing. But well, I remember, my mom, she was on immunotherapy for almost a year too, like after it was all
Yeah.
done. So what is, I mean,
So,
there's certain foods you can't eat at this point.
yeah. So, with having my stomach up here and
Yeah.
not having a sphincter between my stomach and my
Mm.
esophagus means that I can't lay flat because any stomach acid or food or liquid that's in my stomach, if I lay flat, I can aspirate because it'll
Ugh.
travel up my esophagus and go into my windpipe because there's nothing stopping it from doing that. Um, so I can't lay flat. I can't bend over. I can't eat. I eat like a really high protein, low fat, no sugar. Like my diet's completely changed. A lot of the
Mm.
joy's taken out of eating because I have to eat 4 to 5 meals a day. I have to eat small portions. If I
Yep.
overeat, it sucks, and I
Wow.
can't drink and eat at the same time. So like ultimately, like I have the diet that they say is super healthy for everyone. You eat 4 or 5 meals a day, you
Right.
don't drink water and eat at the same time, no sugar. So, I have an amazingly healthy diet, but it'd be great if I was able to choose to have this diet
Yeah.
instead of being forced to have it.
So I want to go back to the lying flat. So how do you sleep then? How do you
Um,
get your, your rest and recovery?
yeah, so adjustable bed, and I just
Really?
have to have the head of the bed.
Up.
It has to be like 30 to 40 degrees angle.
Okay.
And that seems about good. It makes travel hard
I'm
because I have
sure
like a big wedge pillow that either I just
you
have
have
to
to take
buy
with you.
everywhere I go or I have to like travel as a medical device with because
Yeah.
it's a big, big wedge
Big.
pillow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
stacking pillows isn't going to cut it, guys.
it,
Trust me.
it, it, it
It
does in
helps,
a
but
pinch, like if I have to, because I have traveled where I'm like, I'm not gonna bring this, giant pillow with me and I'll just get
right.
extra pillows from the hotel, but it's not as comfortable.
No. No, I can't
But
imagine.
with that, diving into something a little more intimate, my sex life changed completely with
I'm
this
sure I was gonna
because,
just gonna go there. Like it's gotta have
yeah,
affected your sex life.
I can't like do 69. I can't do missionary. I can't be on all fours. I can't, like just oh, anytime I'm horny and ready or my partner's horny and ready, we can't just like jump into it because if I just ate, I'm not going to be able to like do anything because when I'm really
Right.
full, I have to be like really upright and
Mm.
or if I haven't eaten and I need to eat and I don't have the energy to have sex until I get calories in me and
Right.
so it just really sucks sometimes
Mm-hmm.
still.
Mm-hmm.
And to turn 40 and to have this like everything is different now.
Yeah.
And they say that jokingly to everyone. It's like, oh, once you hit 40, everything's, different. But for me, it was like really, really
Mm-hmm.
instantly different at age 40.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning my new body through all of this. I'm hyper aware of my body, being a massage therapist, knowing stuff. I knew something was wrong. I knew I had cancer probably a year and a half, 2 years before I did. Um, so,
So
I'm
that's
just,
also interesting. Did it affect your ability to do your work as a massage therapist? I'm sure it must because there's so much movement in how you stand and everything could possibly have an effect.
yeah, so it did. I'm still a massage therapist, but I cannot massage nearly as much as I used to. You know, I had to raise the height of my table. The training that I got was on a really low height table where
Mm,
you were doing lunges and bending over all the time. And so my table's in the background here. I had to
mhm.
raise the height of my table a lot. I can't do three, four, five clients a day. It's like one or two at most because I have to eat every 3 hours. So,
Right.
and I have to drink at the hour and a half
Up.
intervals in
Right.
between that. So,
Yeah.
there's only a couple of windows throughout the day where I have time to massage and work
But
on
you've
people.
also taken this to a whole nother level, which is the support group you created.
Yeah.
So let's dive
Yes.
into that because this is where those who have to learn to heal themselves as healers, we tend to go create something that's like, I've been through this, I'm going through this. And I mean, this podcast wouldn't exist if I hadn't been, the guy that I was that came out later in life and said, okay, what's going on for guys 40 plus? So let's talk about your group a
Yeah.
little bit because I think there's a lot of guys who might be
Yeah.
interested in it.
Yeah, so I found another support group while I was going through the recovery of surgery, and it was really great, and things were good. But there was a little, situation that happened that was, not really at fault of anyone, but I just kind of branched off from that group and just didn't really need it anymore. But then there came a space where I needed a support group and didn't want to
Mm.
go back to that one. And, I had met a few people, one other person that had esophageal cancer, and I had met Jason, your friend that
Yep.
introduced
Yep.
us. And, I was like, hey, y'all, if I started a support group, would y'all come to it? And they were like, hell yeah. So yeah, back in, I think it was November, we had our first group.
Nice.
Um, and we've just been going every week since then. And it's, some weeks nobody shows up. Some weeks five people show up. Sometimes it's just me and Jason talking.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
and and it's great. And it's been a way for me to create a space that I needed and that I
Hmm.
know other people need.
Yep.
And one of the most rewarding things about it to me is so far, I'm sure this podcast is going to change this, but so far, everyone that's come to the group is someone that I know from some walk of my life. So
Mm.
I have
Mm.
friends on the West Coast that have called in that live elsewhere, people overseas that are interested so far it's been really nice to see these different people in my life from all different places in my life come together because of this common shitty diagnosis
Mm.
of cancer.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so it's a group for anyone on the LGBTQ spectrum. I kind of say that jokingly,
Yep.
and just anyone on that that has had a cancer diagnosis at any point.
Mm.
You don't have to currently be in your battle. It can be in your history, or you can be in the middle of treatments. And it's just the 2 hour meeting every Wednesday from 5:30 to 7:30 Eastern time on Zoom, and it's just a safe space to come and be with other gays that have had cancer
I love
and
it.
get
And I think it's
support.
so important because people go, well, why do you have to have one just for gay people? I'm like, you know what? Let's go. Let's just go there. I'm sure
Yeah.
anybody else who's had this has trouble with their sex life too, but there's a certain thing like, you know, part of what I think a lot of gay men enjoy is, blowjobs in 69. That's something that we just really enjoy. And being able to do that, it kind of just, gets taken away. So you could be in another cancer group and they may be like, why is that so important? I'm more concerned about this. I think this is the interesting space. This is why I created the gay men's chats, is because
Yeah.
let's come talk about what things we need to talk about, guys. Things that, you could go talk about this in other spaces, but it wouldn't be the same sort of feeling.
Yep.
And I think it's so important to find those communities, as you and I discussed before we got on. I can't think of his name, but there we had another guy on who talked about those gay men suffering with prostate cancer and
Hmm.
survivorship. Each of these things serves a pathway forward. And that's why I so badly, Dallas and I kept trying to work around this, trying to get this scheduled. We finally got it scheduled. And I'm so glad we did because I think there's something so special about community. And it
Mm.
doesn't matter if it's two of you that show up or 20, and Jason and I have talked about this with my men's group. I'm like, I never think about the numbers anymore. I just don't, because that doesn't do me any good. What I think about is who's ever present, I'm present, and we go and we have this beautiful time that we share in a space that's safe, in a space that creates connection. Because one of the biggest things that I keep hearing from gay men, especially, but in the LGBTQ space overall, but from gay men, is I just don't know how to create connection. I just don't know how to create community. Guys, maybe you need to start finding some of these spaces if you have this kind of diagnosis, instead of feeling like I'm hanging out here all by myself. Or show up for like the ones that I run, where it's just about gay guys over 40 talking about the stuff that you can't. I'm not going to turn somebody out who's not over 40. I don't have a like, here, sign the age restriction thing before you come on the Zoom call, right? Because I know that people are showing up for what people are showing up for. And I think it's beautiful that you have this group. So I also think for those of you watching on YouTube that you can see his shirt. It's an amazing rainbow shirt with the esophageal cancer and still a sexy bitch. I love that. I love that. I love that. And I also love that you have the word fighting, because this is never it's never gonna be an ending fight for you, right? It's always the cancer may be quote gone, but the fight for how you do life and the adjustments, and it's a constant thing.
And that's the part of it, and that's the reason this type of support group is important, is because, you know, people see me now and they're like, oh my God, you look great, you're in shape, you're putting on a little weight, which has been hard as hell.
I'm sure.
And like they're like, you look amazing, everything's great and glitter and rainbows. But the reality is that like I wake up every morning in a body that feels like shit at least one point in the day. You know, there's never a day that goes by now where there's not something that's a little bit off, you know, and to the point of why does it need to be a specifically LGBTQ group is because I could be in a regular cancer support group, but I'm not going to feel comfortable talking about how like I had this one shit during chemo and my asshole hasn't been the same since. I'm not going to feel comfortable talking about that with a bunch of straight guys or straight people or like straight women being like, oh yeah, like it's really hard for me to bend over and suck my partner's dick now. You know, and that's not, so it's got to be a space that's just comfortable for everything. And we talk about everything in the group too. Like there is no taboo subject.
I think that's the important piece, is being able to realize you can talk about anything, you know, without there being the judgment. And to your point of, it's a never ending thing. 2 strokes. Okay. 2-stroke survivor here. I didn't have any residuals, so to speak. And now that I'm further along beyond those, I notice things a little bit more. Like this week, just in the last 2 weeks since the holidays, I've been noticing the vertigo coming back again. We thought we had fixed that whole thing a year ago, and I'm like, oh wow, it's starting again. There's like this floating feeling and all that. So here we go. I know I'm probably gonna, if it gets out of hand, I'm gonna have to go deal with that once again. Not the worst thing in the world, but it is kind of. There's times I'm like, I'm nervous because I work from home alone a lot of the day. This office that we're in right now recording this podcast is upstairs. I'm like, what happens if the vertigo hits and I'm trying to go down the stairs and I'm here by myself? These are things I know everybody kind of thinks about, but being able to have some place you can talk about it and go, here's what's going on for me, you know, and, you know, sex life sort of stuff is different post-stroke as well. So all of these things, and, you know, it may not be important to somebody else, but for us as gay men, again, you know, if you like sucking dick, you like sucking dick. And now if you can't do it, that really kind of sucks. Again, no pun intended. Well, Dallas, how can somebody find out more about it? I mean, I like to shout it out. We'll put it all on the show page too. But if somebody wanted to participate in the group, what's the best way for them to find out about it?
We have a Facebook group called LGBTQ Cancer Group. You can email at lgbtqcancergroup@gmail.com.
Awesome.
I have the domain for lgbtqcancergroup.com, but I don't have the page up yet. I'm hoping somebody that shows up for group will be like, hey, let me do that webpage for you. But yeah, those are the best ways. You can find me on socials too, the Dallas Oliver on Instagram, and, you know, reach out to me there if you want. But yeah, anyone is welcome. I do like to have a little email or text or phone call before people come into the group, just to make sure you know, you're not
safe
robot to gatekeep. To gatekeep.
I do that too, man. I do that too. Yeah, there's a gatekeep. And it's been interesting just recently to see the group grow on. I mean, I have two. I have the podcast page, which grows like crazy, and it's got there's a lot of robot sort of stuff going on. But to come into the community, you have to like get approved, and I do a little bit of research. So if some of you are listening, like, yeah, I'm not in. I'm like, well, there was something on your Facebook profile that made me go, I don't think so. Like, if you've got a lot of groups and not one of them mentions anything gay, you're probably not getting into my group. I'm just saying that, guys. So I guess go sign up for something gay. But it is interesting. I'm so glad to see you doing this, man. So glad to see you're moving beyond, and you are fighting still to be in the world in the way that you are. And shout out to our buddy Jason for connecting us. I mean, big shout out to Jason for connecting us and saying this could be a really good thing. So Dallas, thank you so much, man, for being here. So appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah, I want to say, thank you, Jason, for connecting us and for really helping me get this group up and going, and for showing up for it and showing up for your community. And yeah, Rick, this has been a pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time with me today and feeling like my story is worthy of this. So I really appreciate it.
And any of you guys listening out there who feel like you've got a story, or you've got something that's had a very positive impact out of something that you as a gay guy over 40 have done, I want you to feel free to reach out to me, rick@rickclemons.com, and say, hey, Rick, I got a story idea. I am so open to having the real conversations. I think most of you that listen, that's the reason we're growing this podcast so much, is because, we're talking real stories here. We're having the real conversations, and I really appreciate it. And I hate to tell it to you guys, but next week, the podcast, you're stuck with me solo right now, unless I find a guest. I haven't done a solo episode in a while, and I feel like it's time to do a few of those. But again, Dallas, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing of yourself. And guys, please connect with Dallas if you feel like this would be a really good supportive group for you as you do the journey to cancer. So that's it, guys. Go have a great week, and we will catch you in just a few days with potentially me solo, but that could change by then. But hope you have a great week, and keep being out there, being yourself, and being the gay man you're meant to be.
That's a wrap for 40 Plus. Gay men, gay talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 Plus, Gay Men, Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.